The Cathari Dominion had not lost a war in 340 years. Its fleet doctrine was taught in 17 allied systems and licensed, in simplified form, to 9 more who could not afford the full curriculum, but wanted their officers to at least recognize a Dominion engagement pattern when it was already too late to matter. Its surrender protocols had been invoked exactly 4 times in 3.5 centuries, and each time the losing side had signed before the first shot was fired, because the math of a Cathari engagement was public record, printed in the Dominion's own recruitment materials as a kind of courtesy. Here is what you are up against. Here is what happened to the last 4 species who found out the hard way. Save yourself the 4 days. 41 confirmed campaigns. 41 confirmed victories. Not close victories. Not costly ones. The Dominion's own historians had a phrase for what a Cathari campaign was supposed to look like on paper, coined 200 years earlier and never revised because it had never needed to be. Decisive within the first exchange. The doctrine was simple enough to teach a cadet in a single afternoon. Overwhelming force, applied with total information advantage, delivered before the enemy had finished calculating what they were facing. A war that looked, from the outside, less like a war and more like a formality being observed out of politeness. Admiral Vecht Sarana had commanded the flagship Ashen Accord for 11 of those 340 years, and in that time she had personally accepted 6 surrenders, standing on the same boarding deck each time, reading the same 3 lines of Dominion protocol to 6 different species who had already decided, somewhere around the second line, that resistance was arithmetic they could not win. She had done this so many times that the ritual of it had become almost comfortable. The trembling data pads, the diplomatic entourages built more for optics than negotiation, the particular silence of people doing math they already knew the answer to. This was the 7th. Earth had held out for 4 months. 4 months against a fleet that had ended other conflicts in 4 days. The analysts aboard the Ashen Accord had recalculated their combat models twice by the 3rd month, and each recalculation had produced numbers that did not resemble 40 years of accumulated Dominion battle data. In Dominion doctrine, numbers that did not match expectation were categorized one of 2 ways: translation error or warning. By the 4th month, nobody on the bridge crew was using the phrase translation error anymore. They had stopped saying it out loud sometime around the human counteroffensive at the Kessering debris field, where a fleet 1/6, the size of the Dominion's forward group, had not retreated, had not surrendered, and had instead done something the Dominion's own tactical AI flagged as non-doctrinal engagement. Recommend reclassification of threat tier. Then, on the 90th day, Earth's fleet simply stopped fighting, not because it had lost. The tactical picture at the moment the ceasefire request came through showed a human fleet still holding position, still armed, still capable. It stopped because a single ship, unarmed, unescorted, broadcasting nothing but a docking request in flawless Dominion trade can, crossed the debris field separating the 2 fleets and asked, politely, to come aboard. The Dominion had never received a surrender shaped like that. There was no protocol for a losing side that did not act like it had lost. Vecht wrote one herself, on the spot, transmitted across the debris field in 9 words that would later be quoted in every after-action report filed that year. 1 representative, 1 hour, no weapons, we will listen. The boarding deck of the Ashen Accord had processed 6 surrenders before this one, and every one of them had arrived with an entourage, advisors, translators. At minimum, a personal guard standing close enough to the delegate to look loyal for cameras that were never actually present, because Dominion protocol did not technically require an entourage. It simply expected one, the way it expected trembling hands and lowered eyes, and the specific stillness of a species doing arithmetic it already knew the answer to. The human came alone. He was of unremarkable height for his species. According to the file Vecht had pulled 3 days before the meeting and read, in full, twice. because the first pass produced a service record that seemed statistically inconsistent with a single career, and she had assumed a data corruption error until the verification came back confirmed on the second pass, cross-referenced against 6 independent forward observer feeds that could not all have been compromised at once. Daniel Reyes, 43 years old, 26 of those years in continuous active service, spanning postings that on any other file would have belonged to 4 or 5 different people. Deep space salvage and extraction under hostile fire. 2 campaigns listed only by coordinates, their operational names redacted before the file had even reached a Dominion analyst's desk. A gap of 14 months with no entries at all, followed by a single line, return to active duty, fit for service, that VEX intelligence staff had spent 11 days trying and failing to explain. He had not requested an advisor. He had declined the Dominion-provided translator, speaking instead in passable, unhurried trade cant that suggested he had learned it specifically for this meeting, and had not felt the need to mention that either. He walked onto the boarding deck carrying a single case, set it down without being asked, and waited, not nervously, not defiantly, simply the way a person waits when they have done difficult things in worse rooms than this one, and this room does not yet strike them as difficult. His eyes, Vec noted, did not change based on what was happening around him. They changed based on what he was thinking, which was a different thing entirely, and a harder thing to read. Part 3, the question Ithel had been saving. Commander Ithel Corin met the human on the deck. Ithel was Cathari command track, third in line aboard the Ashen Accord, and had earned every rung of that ladder the way officers earn rank in a fleet with no history of losing, by being right, publicly, often, in rooms where being wrong ended careers before lunch. He had studied the human war effort for 4 months, cross-referencing every anomalous engagement against Dominion doctrine, and had arrived at one conclusion that the rest of the bridge crew had quietly agreed with but had not said aloud in front of him. Whatever Earth had been doing out there, it was going to stop the moment the Dominion made it unmistakably clear exactly what species it had been fighting. He had prepared a question for this exact possibility 3 weeks earlier, refined it twice, and rehearsed the delivery in a mirror that no one aboard the Ashen Accord would ever know about. He introduced it now the way certain officers introduce a question they have already decided the answer to, with the timing and tone of someone who has prepared it, waiting for an audience that was not filming and did not need to be. Before terms, Ithel said, a formality, for the record, how many confirmed kills does Earth's most decorated combatant carry? He asked it the way one might ask a new recruit their height, a number to note, then set aside mildly, almost kindly. Several officers behind him allowed themselves small private smiles, the specific category of smile that appears in rooms where a hierarchy is already understood to be settled, and the only remaining question is how gracefully the losing side will phrase its acknowledgement of it. Vex said nothing. She had read the human's file 3 times by then. She had, 4 weeks earlier, quietly requisitioned every piece of verified footage the Dominion's forward observers had gathered along the human front, cataloged it, reviewed it twice in private, and set it aside not for this exact question, but for a moment shaped enough like it. She had been waiting, in other words, since the 2nd week of the war, for someone to ask the thing Ithel was asking now. Daniel looked at Ithel for a long moment before answering, the look of a man giving a question genuine consideration, rather than performing consideration for a room that expected performance. "That's a fair question," he said, in the tone of someone who found it genuinely reasonable to ask, no irony in it at all. "Are you asking about me specifically, or about the number the Dominion's going to want written into a record somewhere?" Ithel's smile did not move. "You. Confirmed or total?" A small ripple moved through the crowd on the deck. Not a sound, exactly, more a shift in how people were standing, the kind of stillness that happens right before a room realizes it has already made a decision it cannot take back. Ithel's smile widened by a fraction, the smile of a man who believes he has just watched his opponent hand him the rest of the argument for free. "Confirmed," Ithel said. Daniel said a number. The room did not react the way rooms react to a small number. It reacted the way a wave stops moving. The officers closest to Ithel first, their smiles simply ceasing to be smiles, no drama in the transition, just an absence where an expression had been. Then the officers further back, the stillness spreading outward across the deck until the only sound remaining was the low hum of the Ashen Accord's environmental systems, a sound that had not been audible a minute earlier because there had been other things worth listening to. Ithel did not stop smiling immediately. It took him 3 full seconds, which, on a boarding deck with 40 witnesses and no precedent for this kind of silence, is a very long time to hold an expression that no longer means anything. "That's the confirmed number," Daniel added into the silence not unkindly. "You didn't ask for the total. Nobody asked for it now." Vecht stepped forward before Ithel could recover the shape of his own face. "Commander Corrin," she said, "would you like to see the footage, or would you like to keep asking questions you had not prepared an answer for?" It was not a kindness. It was procedure, and everyone on the deck understood the difference between the two. The footage was not dramatic in the way Dominion combat simulations were built to be dramatic, with their color-coded threat vectors and orchestral scoring, designed to make a cadet's pulse do something specific on cue. It was documentary, unedited forward observer feed, time-stamped, unglamorous, the kind of footage that made no attempt to be watched. Case 1. A supply convoy pinned in a canyon on a moon nobody aboard the Ashen Accord could pronounce correctly, and one human extraction team working through the wreckage with the flat, unhurried competence of people who had done this enough times that fear had stopped being a useful input to the process. No shouting, no visible urgency, just movement, precise and economical, the kind of movement that comes from having done a thing so many times the body no longer consults the mind for permission. Case 2. A boarding action on a captured Dominion corvette, the same team clearing it compartment by compartment. Ammunition conserved with an efficiency that Dominion doctrine did not have a category for, because Dominion doctrine assumed a force that could afford to waste rounds. This one could not, and it showed, and somehow the showing of it was more unsettling than abundance would have been. Case 3. A rescue, 40 kilometers behind hostile lines, marked in the Dominion's own after-action archive, pulled by Vecht's staff 2 weeks earlier and left unread in a queue until this moment as statistically improbable, verify source. Nobody had verified it. Nobody had needed to until now. Case 4. No combat at all. A field hospital, 3 days after an engagement the Dominion had recorded as a minor skirmish, the same human moving between cots with the case now sitting at his feet on the boarding deck, doing something with his hands that the footage did not explain and did not need to. Case 5. The Kessering debris field itself, the engagement the Dominion's tactical AI had flagged as non-doctrinal, shown now not as a strategic overview but as ground-level footage from inside it. Chaotic, close, and at its center, unmistakably, the same unhurried economy of motion that had been present in every case before it. By the 3rd case study, nobody on the deck was speaking. By the 5th, Ithel was watching with the specific expression of a man performing a calculation that was going to take considerably longer than the hour remaining in this meeting to finish. Daniel did not speak during any of it. He stood with his hands folded, watching the same footage as everyone else on the deck, the way a person watches a weather report about a storm they have already lived through and do not need narrated to them a second time. His case sat closed at his feet. Nobody had asked what was in it. Nobody at this point was certain they wanted to know. The footage ended. Nobody moved to fill the silence that followed, so Vecht did. "Commander Corrin," she said, "you asked for a number for the Dominion's records. You now have one. I would suggest you also consider what that number cost to compile, and what it means that our forward observers gathered every frame of it without a single confirmed instance of this man requesting extraction. He had not already earned the right to refuse. Ithel stopped at the edge of the deck, one hand resting on the frame of the corridor door, not quite ready to leave, and not quite able to stay in a room that no longer matched the room he had walked into an hour earlier. "The confirmed number and the total," he said, without turning around. "They're not the same, are they?" "No," Daniel said, "they're not." Ithel did not ask by how much. He left without asking, and on a ship with 340 years of unbroken doctrine, that omission was its own kind of answer. A man choosing to recalculate in private what he had tried, publicly, to settle in a single sentence, and discovering, for the first time in a career built on being right in rooms, that the recalculation was not going to be quick, and might not finish today, or this month, or possibly at all. His after-action note, filed an hour later without comment and without excuse, read in full, recalculating everything else. Daniel picked up the case at his feet. Vecht noticed only now that it was the single thing he had carried onto the deck, and the single thing he would carry off it. "What's in the case, Mr. Reyes?" she asked. "Field kit," Daniel said. "Same one I've carried the whole war. Figured I'd need it either way this went." He did not say it to unsettle her. He said it the way a man mentions what he had for breakfast, unremarkable, unweighted. And that, more than the number, more than the footage, was the detail Vecht would find herself writing into her private log that night, because it was the detail that would not leave her alone. Before he turned to go, one of the younger Dominion officers, barely out of the academy herself, standing near the back of the deck where junior staff were expected to be seen and not heard, asked the only question in the room that had not been rehearsed by anyone. "Were you afraid," she asked, "any of those times?" Daniel considered it the same way he had considered Ithel's question, with the same unhurried seriousness, as though the two questions deserved the same weight regardless of who had asked them or why. "Every time," he said. "That's not the part anybody gets to skip. You just don't get to stop because of it." He nodded once, the particular nod of a man at the end of a long shift, and walked toward the shuttle bay to begin negotiating terms that neither side, an hour earlier, had expected to need this particular kind of negotiating for. Vecht sat alone in her quarters that night with the ship's log open in front of her, the cursor blinking steadily in the field-marked assessment. Human combat capability, preliminary. She had drafted 11 words and deleted them. Drafted 6 more, deleted those 2. 400 years of Dominion assessment protocol expected paragraphs, threat vectors, projected casualty models, comparative doctrine analysis broken into subsections with headers. She had written those paragraphs 6 times before, for 6 other species, and every one of those paragraphs had, eventually, been proven correct by the campaigns that followed them. She looked instead for a long while at Ithel's own after-action note, still open in an adjacent window, 3 words logged and nothing else, recalculating everything else. She did not correct it. She did not think it needed correcting. Below it, in the field that 400 years of doctrine expected to hold paragraphs, she typed a single line, read it once, and for the first time in 11 years of command, closed the file without adding anything more.